Each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today, Stanley Johnson, the head of the Johnson family dynasty, will be in the studio. Now, he's known for being the father of the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And Stanley is famed for being a staunch environmentalist. He's rubbed shoulders with international world leaders and has also enjoyed appearing on reality TV shows such as I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. I'll be finding out all the juicy details from his time inside the jungle and also what he's up to now. Then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are universities still a bastion for free speech? Cambridge University alumni are withdrawing donations due to an intensifying row after one of the colleges publicly denounced a guest speaker over their views on sex and gender. Now, this has called into question whether universities can still be considered places where free speech is welcome. Give me your thoughts as ever. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. It is now time for today's Outside. And, of course, Stanley Johnson joins me in the studio. Now, he's well known for being the head of the Johnson family, including being the father of Boris Johnson. Now, Stanley is well known for his work as a Conservative MEP and also famed for his environmental work and his views. Now, he's rubbed shoulders, as I said, with many international celebrities and world leaders and done quite a few reality shows, which includes I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here in 2017, where he came 7th. And during the show, he struck up a close friendship with the Made in Chelsea star Georgia Toffolo. I remember that. I loved that show, which led to his cameo appearance on the popular Channel 4 show. Stanley has 6 children, including Boris, former MP and Minister Joe Johnson, and journalist Rachel Johnson. Stanley has also climbed one of the world's highest mountains, Mount Kilimanjaro, numerous times in his 70s to prove age is just a number. I'm pleased to say he's here in the studio now. Stanley, thank you so much for coming in.
Well, you're very kind to say numerous times for Kilimanjaro. It was actually only twice.
Well, that's still more than one. You can get away with saying that.
Technically correct, I suppose.
So I want to start with just going back a bit and finding out more about your life and how you kind of came into politics. I know you were an MEP for some time.
Well, indeed. How did I come into politics? I came into politics because it always struck me, if you want to do something in life, the political way is quite an effective way. If you want levers, well, the political lever is one way of getting things done. And originally I said, well, let's try and go through the way of being an MP. But actually, more or less at the time when I was all set to do that, somebody said to me, would I like to join the European Commission? Because Britain, by then, I'm talking now about January 1973, had just joined Europe, you see, and Britain had joined, obviously, the European Commission, and British people were being invited to apply. And someone said to me, Stanley, we think you'd be a good chap there. And Britain has probably got its flag on a job which is called Head of the Prevention of Pollution and Nuisances Division. I said, well, fine. But after 5 or 6 years in that, I'm talking now about 1979, there were the first direct elections for the European Parliament. And I said, fine, I've done 6 years as a civil servant. And by the way, we wrote a lot of that environmental legislation, and later on I'll talk about that. But I said, look, there's a fantastic opportunity to be an MEP. And I was lucky enough to be selected for the fantastic constituency of the Isle of Wight in East Hampshire. And I've got to say, I virtually made it to the Guinness Book of Records because I had 95,000 majority over the next candidate, who was a lovely lady called Lady Nancy Sear. I didn't quite make it to the Guinness Book of Records because the chap who got West Sussex was a wonderful man called Madron Seligman. He had a couple of thousand more votes than I did. But still, that was how I got on. So for me, I came in effective politics via the European route.
And you've had you've done quite a few things. I mean, obviously you're very much into the environment. You're really focused on your environmentalist work. What would you say, in your view, the way we are moving towards this net zero agenda? Do you think that we are going in the right direction?
Well, this country has done its part in this. I mean, I go all the way back to 1992. Oddly enough, this year, which is 2022, is the 30th anniversary of the Rio conference, it was so-called Earth Summit, which adopted the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, abbreviated to UNFCCC. Well, that set out some targets, to limit the rise in the world's atmospheric temperature. Those targets were refined when we got almost 25 years later to Paris. Paris said, no, let's say what we mean. Let's mean not more than 1.5. If we can possibly do it, if we actually can't make 1.5, then at the very least, not more than 2. So we've had some targets, and this country, I've got to say, was the first to legislate legally for a legal limit to the objective, and we legislated in 2008 with the Climate Act, and we've actually brought that forward now. So, in terms of setting the targets, we've done well. Have we achieved them? No. I think the answer is no to that. And taking the world as a whole, we certainly haven't, because in the run-up to this Cop27, you'll see that the UNEP, which is the United Nations Environment Programme, has just come out with a report which says, oh well, brilliant people like Alok Sharma, who chaired the last meeting, said 1.5, let's keep it alive. UNEP has just come out and said, actually, we're more like headed to 2.8 degrees. And this is very bad news.
Yeah, that's bad news. Bad news indeed. I mean, obviously, Boris, your son, he was a big environmentalist.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. You see, I look at this, and truth to tell, obviously, I'm biased. I mean, you very kindly said I'm head of the family. I don't believe that. I think the family is what it is, and Boris has certainly been a tremendous influence. And he, I think, has been very important in the UK environmental policy recently. For example, the G7 meeting in Carbis Bay came out firmly in favour of moving towards net zero on nature protection. The Environment Act, which we passed last year, actually lays a nature protection target. But one of the things, Nana, which really worries me, and by the way, I very much hope Boris does go to Sharm el-Sheikh, because, look what's happened the last couple of days. The mere speculation as to whether Boris will go to Sharm el-Sheikh has actually put Cop27 on the agenda. And I was slightly disappointed, actually, when someone said, well, actually, it's not really as important as Glasgow. I think that's perhaps, diplomatically not a brilliant thing to say, and realistically not. I think year after year after year now, we should be having heads of states going there. So I hope he will go there. And by the way, I hope he will defend our record. But I want him to do one thing also, and that is, this may sound a bit odd, but I want him to appeal to the British government to actually ditch a legacy of the brief Truss administration, which has resulted in Mr. Rees-Mogg, as he left office, proposing, would you believe it, that we will now, as it were, scrap or sunset 750 environmental laws, and a lot of other laws too, but it's those laws precisely, Boris needs to make the point, which are going to give us the ability to meet our nature protection international targets and our climate international targets. So, quite ironically, Boris will be there, A, to proclaim our proud record, but B, to say, actually, watch out, chaps, we are going to really think again about this ill-advised piece of legislation which Rees-Mogg put before the House.
Well, you said you hope he'll go, but then you said Boris will be going. So do you know, will he be going?
No, I can't speak for him, but I will very much. So I can speak for myself, because I just explained why I think it'd be absolutely brilliant. And just take the Amazon, for example. We know there'll be a new Brazilian president. What is number one problem? Really, it's the continued destruction of the Amazon. I wrote a piece in the New Scientist, would you believe it, in 1970 about the destruction of the Amazon. That is going on apace. And whoever it is, whether it's Mr. Bolsonaro or whether it's Mr. Lula da Silva, they need to say, appeal to the world, and we need to appeal to them.
Do you think it's important that, because obviously Rishi Sunak said he's not going to COP27.
Well, we don't know that for sure, do we?
It seems like he's not going to go. He's sending Alok.
I still hope he will.
Well, but he said he's sending somebody else, and he may be doing some other meeting. And then, of course, the King Charles isn't going either. Do you think the King Charles should go? I mean,
I've got to say, he has been absolutely brilliant. If I go back to, I think I mentioned Paris in December 2015, his presence there was absolutely crucial. What he said in Glasgow last year, crucial. And look, it is far above my pay grade to say who should go where. But that said, all I can say is his continued interest, as witnessed, for example, by the meeting held in Buckingham Palace yesterday, is absolutely vital.
Yeah, I actually, even though I think King Charles should butt out of certain things, I actually think that the climate, what they're calling an emergency, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think that things to do with the climate that are global, I don't think that's necessarily political. I think that's something that he should really be doing, and politics we should actually not worry about politics.
Well, there's quite an interesting point here, which you've just raised.
Yeah.
King Charles is, of course, king of the United Kingdom and its constituents. He's also king of Scotland, but he's king of, as far as I remember, 12 or 13 other countries, and I do wonder whether those countries might quite like King Charles, their king, to be in Sharm el-Sheikh.
Now, do you think, are you disappointed that Boris didn't run again?
Well, I don't talk about family matters
but you can say that
on television. I'm not talking about family matters here. We are where we are on this one. We've got a fine, upstanding Prime Minister who has taken on a difficult hand and he's driving it forward. As long as he ditches Rees-Mogg, he'll have my vote.
Oh, yeah. No, well, I'll be honest. I wanted Boris to run again, but obviously he didn't. Do you think he'll come back though? Will he come back later? Maybe.
Again, I'm absolutely not speculating. Not in there, of course, it's worth a try, but definitely not speculating.
But you think, but Rishi Sunak, he seems to have his hand on the tether. Seems to have a good handle on the economy and things. Do you feel confident going forward?
Yes, I do. I promise you, I do feel confident. I certainly don't want to make it seem as though I've been negative. I think basically what happened, it was his very first day of office, this Rees-Mogg thing came in. Do you see what I mean? I think he must have been taken completely by surprise. So my thoughts are with him, my prayers are with him, and my expectations are with him, but I've just got my fingers crossed.
And your view on the migrant situation, I wondered where you stand on, having seen the way it's been handled. I know you said, obviously, you were there before we joined the EU, you became an MEP, so you must have a handle on these sort of issues around the Europe. Yes.
Look, this is where I am. I think we've got to forget this war, which in a way is what Rees-Mogg was all about. He's still fighting that war. God, we've really got to wrap it up, show them we're really in charge. No, the crucial thing at this moment is for us to rebuild as firmly as we can the bridges with Europe. We absolutely need to do that. We need to do it, by the way, for economic reasons as much as anything else. If we let our own standards drop, environmental standards, animal welfare standards, labour protection, don't forget, the labour protection laws are terrifically under threat. Our friends in the European Union are not going to say, OK, we'll continue to trade with you on the normal arrangements. We're already seeing a fall-off in our trade with Europe. We certainly can't afford to let them, say, look, you're not playing your side of the pitch.
Well, if we move away from politics then, because I watched when you were on I'm a Celebrity.
Oh, did you?
I loved that, you and Georgia Toffolo. You got on so well. What was doing that like? A lot of people say that it was actually a lot harder than it looked.
Well, I saw you had Christine Hamilton on earlier today. And Christine, I think, was there in...
I remember that one.
I think she must have been there in 2003. And I went, well, I don't want to, say... Anyway, she was I thought it was tremendously good fun. I thought it was particularly good fun in the sense that for 17 days, I think I was there, you can't write anything, you can't read anything, you can talk to your fellow, contestants, and you've got your thoughts for company. I sat there and I looked at this wonderful Australian rainforest and I thought, what a fantastic country Australia is, and I often go to Australia anyway. And then it gives you a chance to do all sorts of things you wouldn't normally do, like eat bull's testicles, for example.
Nice.
Since when? Since when are you going to be given that opportunity again? And I'm only joking now, of course. There are all sorts of things. And I remember, for example, with Becky Vardy. Now, Becky Vardy's become tremendous. She was such a nice lady. Tremendously nice.
Vardy?
Becky Vardy, yes.
Really?
Have I got this right?
No. You said she's a nice woman.
Yes, she is. I want to tell you, she absolutely was. Couldn't have been nicer. And we had Amir Khan. We had Shabi Khorsandi. We had a wonderful collection. So who would not enjoy being with people? Basically, I worked out that I was 40 years older than the average age of that group. Well, it's fine. It's fine
Sounds
for me.
great. Sounds great. I sort of wouldn't want to do that one. I'd have to take my wig off.
They'll have you off. They'll have you off in Brisbane. Yes, still time to join the crowd. I see that
thank you. No, thank you. Well, actually, how much? How much? Yeah. All right, I'll do it.
You will, exactly.
You can twist my arm.
No.
So Stanley, what are you up to now then? What are you doing now then?
I am doing all kinds of things. I'm actually fairly heavily involved in trying to set up something called the World Coastal Forum, which is going to group countries around the world, communities around the world, even local authorities, to say, actually, 50% of the world's population lives within 10 kilometres of the coast, something like 50% of the world's economic activities. So on the way back from Italy, I'm going to Italy on Monday, but on the way back I'm going to spend some time in Geneva where we got a meeting, an international meeting, which will launch this World Coastal Forum. And I've got to say, my hat's off. I know the Chinese are not everybody's flavour of the month, but the Chinese have been fantastic in the effort they have put in to try and get this WCF going. And it will go, it will work. And, 3 years from now, we will find that countries around the world have said, yes, actually, the coasts really need protection, not just because of global warming, but for all sorts of reasons.
Well, Stanley Johnson, thank you so much for joining me. It's so good to talk to you.
Very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. That is, of course, Stanley Johnson.